Welcome everyone to Debating for 2022. My name is Melissa. I am a third year Law and Global Studies student. I've been debating since year 11 and unfortunately I am still debating. So excited to be back for another year of strong debating at Auckland DebSoc. Cool, so you might be wondering, whoops, just trying to get my slide to work. Isn't debating just for nerds and law students? I don't know. What's the answer to this question? Whoops, sorry, wrong way. No, it's definitely not just for nerds and for law students. I had the same conception about it when I was in high school, and I thought it was just something that people that wanted to go to uni and do law did. But then I realized that there are a lot of topics in debating that aren't about niche law related things. It's useful for everyone to develop confidence because you get used to things like getting up in front of people with a short amount of preparation time and giving a convincing argument, as well as just, generally developing confidence around new people and people you haven't met before. And when we're not in COVID times, you get to travel to some very exciting places. I have traveled the country throughout my 3 years, well, this is my third year. Throughout my few years at university, I've been up and down the country doing debating, which was a very, very exciting opportunity and something I hope everyone gets in the future. So yes, and then in general, debating can be about literally everything. You'll see that in the seminar. I picked some really fun motions for us to just have a little play with. But yes, welcome to everyone joining later on. Okay, so I hope that's breaking down your preconception that debating is for nerds and law students. It's for everyone and it can be very fun and take you lots of places. Okay.
Sorry, Melissa, just before you move on, we're just having some tech issues in the in-person room. I'll let you know once they're resolved. Sorry about the delay, everyone.
Do you want me to pause?
I think it's probably just worthwhile just while we work out this.
Okay. While we're waiting for the technical difficulties, welcome to my friends in the Zoom. We should, have a little chat.
Oh yes, sorry, I'll chat. Just letting us get in touch with the in-person people.
Hopefully we get that issue resolved soon.
If it's not resolved in about 2 minutes, we'll just keep going and they can catch up on the start later.
I don't think we'll miss out on too much, and I'm sure that Aisha or whoever is in person with them can give them a bit of a rundown on the things that they miss.
Brilliant.
Yes. Have you guys in the Zoom done any debating before? Thumbs up, react if you have. I don't know what the other reactions are, but any other reaction for no?
Are these development sessions, are they weekly?
Yep, so every single week the hour before we do club night, it's going to be running before then, so you have some skills to apply at club night that we run afterwards if you choose to debate. Harry, does that celebration emoji mean that everything's fixed? Or is it just a general celebration emoji?
A general celebration because debating is fun.
Oh, so true, Harry. Love that spirit. Okay, yeah. Do you guys have any like specific ideas that you'd like to do in debating? Like, do you have any like specialized areas? Like if you're a science student, do you really like science? Science is cool. Yeah, I really like random hypothetical motions because I get to make up lots of stuff. I really like the lying aspect of debating. It's my favorite part.
We're all good to keep going.
Okay. Excellent. I will just do a very, very quick introduction again to those of us that are in person. If my slides work. No. Okay, here we go. Hi everyone, I'm Melissa. I'm the Development Officer, third year Law and Global Studies student. Done debating a little bit in high school. but most of my debating has been done at uni. So welcome everyone to debating at Auckland 2022. Is debating just for law students and nerds? No, debating isn't dry. It's really fun. It's really good for developing confidence, making friends, meeting new people, and traveling. Not in COVID times, but I've been up and down the country when we have been allowed to with alert levels and traffic lights, etc. And also before COVID existed, we went to lots of fun places like Bali, and this year's Worlds are in Madrid, so all over the world, very fun. And debates can be about literally anything, not just dry things like law and politics. It can be about like, I remember my first club night debate, the motion was about whether you should be able to trial by duel, and Harper and I argued that in criminal cases, the Queen should be the person that duels, and she's able to shoot people. I think that's really cool. Okay, introduction to uni debating. I know some of you might have debated before in high school, and some of you might have absolutely no experience with debating. So for everyone, this will be really useful just to have an idea of the kinds of things that we do at university. So the first kind of style of tournament that comes in university debating, and also generally the format of our club nights in the first semester, is a 3v3 format. So the really fun tournament that we run in early May is called Therapi. It's a novice tournament, it's 3v3. So you'll have 2 other people on your team. Everyone will do one speech and there will be a leader's reply. And I'll go into that format in more depth in a little bit once we've gotten past general introductions. So that's the kind of fun tournament that novices are very much encouraged to go to. There's also Joint Scroll, which is a tournament, a national tournament against all of the other universities in New Zealand. Auckland is on a 2-year winning streak, so very fun. We're a very strong society. Second tournament, or kind of big international tournament, that's usually first up in the year. I think this year, because of COVID, the timetable is quite weird, so it's later in the year, but usually it would be during the intersemester break, and it's another 3v3 tournament, but you don't have points of information. Again, I'll explain what that means later. The third kind of format or style that we do in New Zealand, this is more specific to New Zealand as well, is called Officers' Cup. It's an impromptu style of debating. So there'll be 2 teams of 2 that speak against each other. They only have 5 minutes to prepare their case and their speeches, and then they debate against each other. It's very, very fun because you can focus on more of the creative parts of debating rather than the like nitty-gritty responses and things like that. And then the final format that we do is called British Parliamentary. This is usually done by pretty much every other university in the world. It obviously comes from a very old format that's styled off of Parliament. So there's 4 teams that are all trying to win the debate. And so there'll be 4 teams of 2. Everyone's trying to win over each other. It's very fun because you have to come up with a really unique strategy and very creative arguments. And we usually host a very fun development version of British Parliamentary, and usually around October. So here are some examples of some of the tournaments that I have been to. Joint Scroll last year was in Hamilton when we won. Really fun photo of us with the shield or with the scroll. And then here's some fun photos that I have with my teammates and me in Wellington at New Zealand British Parliamentary early last year. So very fun. It's a very positive vibe. As you can see, we love to hype each other up with those little fun signs that we have at NZBP, and some fun team photos, as you can see in the one where I'm jumping with Grace and Liam. Very creative moment outside of debating for me. So hope that this reflects that debating can be a very good fun time with friends as well as debating. So let's now go over the club night format. So this is what you will do if you sign up to debate at our club night that's coming up at a little bit past 6. So it happens every Thursday directly after the seminar that I run. So there will be 2 teams of 3 speakers in each room. So a room is like just a debate that's happening. So 2 teams of 3 speakers. One team will be arguing for the affirmative side, and then the other team will be arguing for the negative side, and you'll get told which side you're arguing for before the debate happens. So each speaker will have 6 minutes to speak. Big emphasis on that is the maximum time that you can speak for, not the minimum time. So if you haven't done any debating before, no pressure to whack out 6 minutes the first time that you get up to speak, but I'm sure lots of you will have so many thoughts that you can go way past 6 minutes. So I encourage you just to give it a good go. So on top of those, everyone on the teams, so in the 3 members of each team giving one speech, there'll also be something called a leader's reply. So this is given by the first or second speaker, and it's half the time, and you're essentially just giving a summary of the debate. I'll explain this more, but hopefully once I give the order, it will kind of make a little bit more sense. So the orders of speeches are that the first speakers go first. So it'll be the first affirmative speaker, and then once they finish their speech, the first negative speaker, and then the second affirmative speaker, so on until you get to the end of the substantive portion of the debate, which is it ends with the third negative speaker. And then what happens is the reply speakers will then go. So either the first or second speaker from either team will be, you guys will discuss as a team who will be the reply speaker before the debate happens. But whoever's going to be the reply speaker, the order is reversed. So the negative reply speaker will go first, and then the affirmative reply speaker. So it gives the affirmative team the opportunity to be the kind of final say in the debate, when they've always been the one to go first and then get replied to by the affirmative, the negative team, sorry. So as well as this kind of format, something else that's a big component of debating, but obviously there's no pressure to do it, it's not compulsory, is something called points of information. So points of information are when between the first, so there's 6 minutes of a person's speech, the judge will either clap or there will be a bell go off at the end of the first minute of that person's speech, and then at the end of the 5th minute of that person's speech, to indicate that the gap or the window for points of information is open. So that means that in those 4 minutes of that person's speech, if you're on the opposite team, you can ask that person a question or kind of give them just an interjection that's phrased as a question. So it can be offered in that 4-minute window, and you would offer it by standing up if you're with them in person and saying point of information, or point, or on that point, variations of those phrases. And then if they say yes and accept your point of information, you can say what you had thought of, and that should, what you're saying, last no longer than 15 seconds. So if they say no, however, you just sit down and then offer again later in the line down their speech. But I'm sure once you see this in practice, it will make more sense, and I can obviously answer any questions if anyone has any as we move through. So hopefully that gives you an overview of the format of the debates that will happen at 6 o'clock. So more specifically on points of information, then obviously, as I said earlier, they're not compulsory, but the important aspect of them is that they must be phrased as a question. So you're not just using it as an opportunity to have more time to argue your points. You would do something like say a simple statement and then ask them what they think about that statement, or phrase it in a way that it's something that they have to answer, because that's kind of the goal, is that you're forcing them to respond to a specific part of your speech, or forcing them to respond to a specific inconsistency in their case. So in terms of specific roles of the speakers, so now that I've shown you the order of the debate, every single person in the debate will have a different role or a different kind of purpose in why they speak, where they speak. So the first affirmative speaker, their job is to obviously give just a little bit of setup for the debate. So if you've heard of a model before, if you've heard of just specific types of characterization, no worries if you haven't, but this is where it would go. What you're doing is giving all substantive material. So substantive means that you're arguing for your case rather than responding to the other team's case, and giving just a really good foundation for your later speakers to build off of. The first negative speaker will have quite a similar role. The only difference though is that in the early parts of their speech, they should give a few responses to the case that they heard from the other team. So hopefully, if you get to a good point in debating, most of the speech, if you're first negative, the speech that you've written will directly respond to what the affirmative team has said anyway, but you should still try and give some specific responses first to the other team. So those are the first speaker roles. Moving then to second speakers. If you're a second affirmative speaker, you're trying to move your case forward. So you're trying to look at the kind of material that your team brought at the first speech and identify places where you can kind of strengthen it or make things seem more important or bring it forward in a way that makes it more convincing so that you're more likely to win. So you should also then, because this is the first opportunity that your team has to respond to the negative team, you should also bring a lot of responses to their speech. Second negative speaker will be quite similar to the second affirmative team, but you should again have a very responsive focus. So you're focusing on responding to the other team more than you are building off of your first speaker's case. The third speakers can be a very, very fun role. This is where I started. When I started debating in high school, I was a third speaker. So the affirmative speaker at third, their job is to tie the whole case together. So you're looking at the ideas that your first and second speaker talked about, and then kind of weighing them more against what the negative speaker said. So our team has said this, their team has said that. We think our team's material was more important for this many reasons. And then the negative speaker at third is also having a similar role, so explaining why their case altogether was very significant and won you to the debate. Okay, so in terms of an actual structure for a first speaker, what you should kind of focus on is bringing these 4 or 5 things in your speech. So if you're an affirmative speaker, you should start with just a brief introduction, so maybe 30 seconds, or I wouldn't go more than a minute because you only have 6 minutes to fill, is just give some context about maybe what's happening in the world, why your case is important. If there's like a very topical like news event that's just happened, maybe you would bring something up like that. But again, just giving your case a little bit of context as to why it's important. Secondly, then you'd bring in things like a model. So it's just like the parameters in which the debate exists. These parameters could be things like definitions of words or clarifications of what your team policy is. Say the motion asks you to support a tax, maybe you would give that tax like you think it's 10% or you think it's 25%. Or if you're giving parameters around where you think the debate takes place in the world, if it's like a very unique motion, maybe you would do things like, we think this debate takes place only in New Zealand. Things like that. It will usually be quite clear from the motion that you're given, especially the types of motions that we will set for you at club night, what these things would be. We're not going to set something like very, very complicated that people wouldn't have fun speaking about. Then thirdly, what you're going to do is just give a breakdown very explicitly, like in the introduction paragraph of when you're writing an essay, of what your arguments are going to be. So it'll, for example, be my 3 arguments in the speech will be firstly, example, secondly, and then thirdly. And that kind of just gives for your adjudicator an idea of where you're going in the speech and makes it very clear what they're following through and what you're trying to win the debate on. And then fourthly, you're going to bring the actual substantive material. So you've just said that you're going to give 3 arguments, it might only be 2, doesn't really matter. But then after you've explained, like you would in an introduction of an essay, you get to the body of your essay. So then this is when you're bringing the real like thrust of your arguments, and it will have lots of different components. I'll talk about structuring those arguments a little bit later on. So that's if you're the first affirmative speaker, because you'll be the very first person in the debate to give a speech. So that's the kind of things that you'll be talking about. If you're the negative speaker, obviously someone has been before you. So that means that you're doing all of the same things as the affirmative speaker at first, but you're also doing things like responding to what the speaker before you has said. So you'll do the classic, bring an introduction, bring a model or parameters to the debate, and then tell the adjudicator what you're going to argue about. But then fourthly, instead of moving straight to a substantive material, you should probably give a few responses to what they've said, even if it's just, they said this, we think that's wrong for these reasons. So really simple responses when you're starting out, but you can make them more complicated as you move through. And you can also do things like integrate responses. Again, I'm going to use a lot of foreign terms. I'll try and mentally note when things need more explanation, but this is when the chat function is really useful if you don't understand what I'm talking about, because there's a lot of jargon in debating that's really lame, but it still exists, so it still needs to be explained. Okay, beyond first speakers though, there are second speakers. So second speakers will have a little bit of a different and a little bit more complex structure, because you've got more material in the debate to kind of move through, because instead of just one person or no people speaking before you, you have two people that have spoken before you, and one of them is from your team. So you kind of want to follow a really basic version of this structure. So firstly, you'd also do like an introduction. So another 30-second or 1-minute block of just explaining why this debate is happening, why your case is relevant and important. And then you'll move into the same kind of split, or just signal for the adjudicator what you're going to talk about. So it's like you do it in an essay, like I said before. Firstly, I'm going to argue about this, and secondly, I'm going to argue about this. So once you've given that brief little part of your introduction, what you're going to do, instead of bringing more substantive material like your first speaker did, is you're going to be bringing a lot of responses. So the responses are a really easy way to make your speech a lot more clear, and an easier way for you to mentally organize things is to kind of categorize all of the responses that you have. So here's an example that I put in the slides. If a debate is that we should prefer cats over dogs, and both teams have points about which is the cuddliest, you should probably categorize all of your reasons why like cats are cuddlier in a specific section that's different to like why cats are easier to look after, if that makes sense, because they're different like responses to different points. If you separate things out a little bit more, it makes it easier for you mentally to walk through lots of different reasons why each different thing is true. Because what confused me all the time in high school, and took me many years to understand because I was really dumb when I was a teenager, was when things got muddled up in my mind, I couldn't get to the end of arguments. So it's really helpful if you kind of separate things out that are different from each other. So you'll have quite a big responsive section in your second speech, because you're trying to deal and respond to every single thing that their first speaker brought out. So for example, if I am the second affirmative speaker, I'm trying to respond to every single thing that the second negative speaker has said. So again, you're just trying to, no pressure to actually do it, but that's kind of the goal that you're working towards. So once you've responded to everything that the speaker before you has said, what you'll do then is bring some more substantive material to the debate. So this could either be in the form of just like bringing more reasons why one of your first speaker's points was particularly important, or just extending it a little bit further, or maybe you're bringing an entirely new aspect of the debate. Maybe your first speaker didn't talk about how, I don't know, you don't have to walk cats when you have to walk dogs. So a point about exercising your pet, and you're bringing that at the end of your speech. So that's where it would go in terms of the structure at the end, if you're trying to move the debate forward in a way that is bringing new material. Okay, and if you're the second negative speaker, obviously your responsive portion would be a little bit larger because you've had more speakers to respond to. But either way, following this general structure. In terms of third speakers though, thirds can be very, very fun because you have a lot of freedom about what you're doing with the debate, and it's a lot of like really good at teaching you how to strategize and very good at teaching you how to categorize a lot of information quite quickly. But I think personally for me, this was the easiest speaker position to get my head around as a kid, but everyone will be very different because it kind of depends how your brain works and what part of debating you really like. So as a general structure, firstly, do the same little introduction that other speakers have done. Then secondly, do the same little introduction in terms of telling your judge, okay, I'm going to talk about these three things. 1 is this, 2 is this, 3 is this, and then get into the like nitty-gritty of the debate. So what you're trying to do is the debate will probably boil down to some categories of arguments. So you should give in these categories an overview of why the arguments that your first and second speaker brought were better, or why they were more like important, or why they were like better explained, so that you can try and get to the winning point in the debate. Because you can win a debate in many different ways, but you're trying just to win it in every aspect that you can. And then as well as talking about your own team's arguments, you should be having a little bit of a discussion about why the responses from the other team to those arguments were either maybe they weren't enough or maybe they weren't true, and then giving reasons why for every time you are making a statement. Because we have a little bit more time to look at the debate as it unfolds, what you should be kind of doing is thinking about how things fit in with each other. So while second has to come up with a lot of responses in a pretty short amount of time, because you have a little bit more time to sit back and look at the debate, you should be trying to do something that's called being meta. So you're explaining why, okay, they said this, we said this, but our thing was more important, and therefore it wins us the debate because we were the team that talked about more important things. I know this is probably quite confusing at this stage, but it's really helpful watching a debate or being in a debate. These things will become more clear how they work in practice. So once you've gotten through all of the substantive part of the debate, there is another speech that I explained earlier, the first or second speaker will do, called a leader's reply. So the negative reply will go first, and then the affirmative reply. It helps to think of these speeches as kind of like a biased adjudication or a biased judgment that's in your team's favor. So essentially, what you're giving as a reply speech is what you want the adjudicator to say at the end of the debate. So you're looking at all of the things that have happened in the debate. You're saying similar things like what your third speaker said, like they said this, we said this, here's why our material was more important. But you're kind of looking at the debate as it happened. So you're not bringing in new material, you're not bringing in new responses like your third speaker would have. What you're doing is just analyzing the debate, but analyzing it in a way where the outcome is that your team has won each argument and therefore won the debate. So that's kind of what happens when you're a speaker. Another big part of debating is what happens before the debate, when you get given a motion and then you kind of have to look at it and turn that into a case. So you'll get lots of different types of motions in debating, and they're all very fun. Here's some different types that we will often see at club nights that will be helpful for you to kind of be aware of before you start doing any debating. So the first type, and usually the most common, is the model or change debate. So this is where you're arguing for or against something to happen, or like a policy to be put in place, or like something to change that is different from now. So classic example is something like this house would legalize all drugs, or this house believes that New Zealand should replace its own school curriculum with the curriculum of a well-performing country. So these are debates where something is changing or something is happening and you have to argue for or against it. Another type of motion is a judgment debate. So instead of something happening, you're kind of preferring something over another, or you're regretting something. So it's more of like a reason why you should think a certain way, or you're arguing why you should think a certain way rather than why something should change or something should happen. So a really fun one that we got set at joint last year was, you're a bachelorette. You've narrowed it down to the two final bachelors. Bachelor A is adventurous, outdoorsy, and has a popular travel Instagram. And choosing him, that's meant to say him, bad typing for me. Choosing him would enhance both of your careers. Bachelor B, you feel somewhat more connected to, but he is a reliable homebody who works as an accountant. This house would select Bachelor A. So you're kind of arguing why the bachelorette should care about some things over other things, and it's a very, very fun debate that unfolds. Another form that you might get, though, is this house regrets. So you kind of have to prove to the judge why they should or why they shouldn't regret something. So an example of a motion like that would be, this house regrets the narrative of lifelong friendships. So you're coming up with reasons, if you're affirmative, why lifelong friendships are bad, what kind of signals they create, what kind of mindsets they create in the debate. And then if you're negative, obviously you're arguing the opposite. So I'll just signal here, another type of motions that you might get, that could be any type of, either one of these motions is called an actor motion. So an actor motion is when you as someone else, or you as a person or an entity, or just someone who is different from who you are, would do something. So for example, it might be, if we're looking at the first motion, this house as the New Zealand government would legalize all drugs. So you're still thinking of the same thing, so why it should change, but you're just thinking it from the perspective of someone different. So you're thinking it from the perspective of a government. So it might change your argument slightly, because obviously a government will have reasons for why they believe certain things, and that will probably be different from, if you're just an everyday person. Okay, so when you're approaching a motion, kind of things that you want to think to yourself are, why have they set this motion? Judges in all of their wisdom, why have they picked this motion for us to debate today? And what's the core issue of this debate? So for example here, this house believes that violent protests are necessary to advance social movements. I think the kind of core of this debate would be, is it preferable to have, as a social movement, to have high level media attention, or is it, about whether you're going to get demonized by the media? And then how do social movements actually achieve progress? Because then you kind of think about, oh, well, maybe media attention is really important, so that's why you should be violent, because that's going to get you media attention. Or what kind of progress is good progress? If you're getting lots of media attention because you're being violent, is that even progress in the first place? So you're thinking about all of these kind of competing incentives, and all of just the kind of logical outcomes that might happen. So here's another example. In a world in which the technology has recently been created to impregnate men, this house, as the male partner of a young career-focused woman, would choose to carry their baby. So obviously in this debate, compared to the last one, you're thinking about a lot of different things and a lot of different incentives and things that motivate people to the last debate. So obviously some questions you might ask yourself are, what is the best thing for the family? Do you think that it's better in this scenario that the motion has given us, that the young career-focused woman carry the baby and potentially sacrifice her career? Or would it be better for the male partner to carry the baby? And then what is important, or what is going to be good for the woman's career? What is going to be good for the relationship? And then looking at outside incentives, because it's not just about like the two people in the relationship. Will they be scrutinized? Do you think that their family might have like weird ideas about what's happening because it's obviously not common? Or will other people outside of their relationship, beyond their family, look at them weirdly? And that's a big enough consequence to justify the woman carrying the baby and potentially sacrificing her career. So you're just looking at lots of different things in the debate and in the world that's happening around people, and bringing them into kind of arguments. So you've gotten the motion. Another important part of debating is preparation time. So before club night, we'll tell you the motion, you get the motion, and then you and your team will have 30 minutes to prepare the arguments. So what you're going to do in that time, and what I recommend is the most helpful way for you to use that time, is for the first 5 minutes, you'll brainstorm individually. So by yourself, silent time, just for you to do things like look at the words in the motion. So what does this, there's a young career-focused woman, what does she care about? There's another man in the relationship, what does he care about? The other many things in the debate that you're going to take those 5 minutes just to process in your own head. And then for the next 10 to 15 minutes after that 5-minute brainstorm, that's when you guys as a team are going to share all of your ideas, tell each other, you know, what you see happening in the debate and what kind of arguments you see forming, and agree on that case outline. The next 10 minutes, you guys should all spend that 10 minutes helping that first speaker set up the case for their speech. And then if the second speaker has a unique point, then that should be the time when they're writing it. So in this 10 minutes, it's important to remember that debating is a team sport. And for example, if your first speaker didn't get very much help in the preparation time, they get up and they don't give a very well mechanized speech that you guys could have delivered if you'd worked together, that means that your job at second and third is going to be really, really hard, or a lot harder than it needs to be. So make sure in prep time you give your first the best opportunity to give a really good speech, so that your second and third speeches can also be better because you're defending a really well delivered argument. So after you've spent the first 25 minutes of prep getting to an end point, in the last 5 minutes, it's really helpful if everyone together goes over the case. You go over what you've got, make sure everyone's on the same page, kind of the things that you're arguing for, what you think are the most important parts of the debate. So therefore, the second and third speaker should focus on those things and their responses, and make sure that you all are carrying a consistent line so you look like a team rather than, you know, knifing each other in the back. Like my first speaker made a really weird argument. I don't agree with that. Here's my thoughts. Shouldn't really be doing that. Make sure you're all together on the same page. So here's some kind of questions that you could ask yourself in that first 5 minutes when you're silently brainstorming that will help you come up with some ideas. So firstly, I always think about who's in the debate. So is it a debate about individual people? Is it a debate about governments? What about, like, are there families in this debate? Are there communities? Because they're all going to think differently. So once you've come up with all of those groups, ask yourself, how do they think? What do they want at the end of this debate? What's the goal for them? And then once you have an idea for that, you can start doing things like asking yourself what happens in the short term. What about the long term? Because, for example, your side might have really good benefits in the short term, but not many in the long term. So you should be thinking about, okay, why is the short term more important? Because the other team's going to do the opposite and argue if their side has really bad outcomes in the short term, but really good outcomes in the long term, they're going to be arguing why the long term is more important. So thinking about that kind of thing. And then within the debate, if you're changing something, if you're preferring something, what does that change signal? And then what does that change actually do? So if you think about those kinds of things, it can help you think about why your case is really significant, or potentially reasons why the other team's case won't be as significant. Okay, so here is how you would break down an argument. I'll briefly touch on principled arguments, but I feel like it's quite hard to understand those for now. But for those of you that have heard of principled arguments before, what you would do is explain the principle, then explain why the principle is important, and then explain how it specifically relates to the debate and underpins your case. Like, for example, a principled argument would be something like freedom of speech, because it doesn't really have necessarily any practical benefits or practical harms. You'll talk about if the debate, there are practical harms to not having freedom of speech, probably talk about that later in the debate, but you could make an argument why freedom of speech is just intrinsically important, so that it's just important without having any practical effects. It's just as important. So a practical argument is when you're coming to those conclusions about something having a benefit or something having a harm. So here's a brief little structure that I would encourage you guys to use in club night tonight if you're going to be doing the debating. So I've given you examples of how you can structure your speech, but this is what you would put in the substantive section. So this is how you structure an argument. The first thing you do is you give your argument a title. So if we're doing a debate about legalizing all drugs, maybe you're giving it a title of why drugs aren't as bad, or how legalizing all drugs helps addicts get help without any stigma surrounding them. So you give it a short title, which is basically just the crux of what that argument is. Once you've given it a title, you want to give some context about what the world looks like. So what's happening in the world that makes that argument relevant? So like, is there no support for addicts? Like, do we look down on addicts really, really harshly? Like, what kind of world is this debate taking place in, so that it makes your argument like really, really significant and really important? So once you've given the context of what's happening in the world, you want to give reasons why your point works. So if we go back to the example of in a world where the technology exists, we're impregnating the man, we're affirming that motion, we want him to carry the baby. What we're going to do there is give explicit point, like reasons why the point works. So say the title of this point that we're doing is that it's going to be better for the woman. So one of the reasons why that will be better for the woman is it will be like, firstly, she can continue working. That means that she's more likely to be promoted or continue on good career trajectory, giving all reasons why it's like going to be good for her career. And if you give more layered reasons, it's going to be more convincing, because if the other team responds to that argument by saying, oh, but what if she gets sick and she can't get through that career trajectory anyway? You still have other reasons why it's still going to be good for her. And then once you've given lots of reasons why the point is true, you want to explain why it's important that that point is true. So what you do there is explain how it affects people, because you can prove something, you can prove an argument's true, but you might still lose the debate because it's not very significant if that point is true. So for example, you're explaining why it's important that that woman can progress in her career. So that's things like she can make lots of money, that's going to be really good for the family because the kid can have a good quality of life, they can have security in their housing, they can have security in making sure they can put food on the table. So why it really matters for that family and why it really matters for everyone in that debate. Because when you're making those kinds of like extensions to your arguments, it makes it really clear for the adjudicator what kind of world the world looks like and why the world is really good on your side compared to the other side. Okay. So now that we've been through making an argument, feel free to ask any questions about that. I'm just going to give some very general tips for speaking, public speaking in general, but especially speaking and debating, that will help you get through it all. So I think the first one is looking up. I think especially in debating, it's very important that what you're writing down to prompt yourself to talk about things isn't exactly what you're going to say. So you're not writing word for word what you're going to say in the speech. You're just giving little bullet points to remind yourself what you're going to talk about. So obviously, like, your speeches might not be particularly fluent. When you start, you might stumble all your way through the speech. I know I still do that even, but that's okay. It's just about thinking about the main argument, because looking up can help you look more confident and be more fluent as you force yourself to keep talking through things. I think my second big tip would be to slow down. I think everyone's gets really caught up in how it is quite nerve-wracking to get up there and give a speech, but if you slow down, you're actually more likely to make it to the full 6 minutes, and it's more likely that your judge is going to hear everything that you're saying, because you can talk really, really fast, but that it just makes it more likely that your judge is going to miss the really important parts of your speech because they were just trying to write everything down rather than understand what you're saying. So if you slow down, it's more likely that your judge is going to be able to pick up on all of the really smart things that you're saying. The third thing is keep a timer. Really cool part about phones nowadays is that they have a little stopwatch function. There's also apps that you could use, but I don't bother with those because I don't know how to work technology. I just know how to use a stopwatch. So if you just use a stopwatch on your phone, press the start button when you start speaking, it kind of gives you an idea of, you can look down at it while you're speaking and go, oh, I've already spoken for 3 minutes. I didn't even realize that. And you can have an idea of, maybe I should move on to my next point because I've already spent quite a lot of time speaking about something else. So it gives you just an idea of how you're timing things and when you should start thinking about talking about the next thing in your speech. Fourthly, I hope that the things I talked about earlier have given you a little bit of an idea about structuring your speeches. So I think structure is definitely one of the things that can either make your speech amazing and really easy to follow, or it can be really hard to actually put all of your ideas into that structure. So I'd really recommend, even if you don't get all of your ideas out there, if you just give yourself small goals to start with, where, okay, I'm just going to focus today on trying to structure what I say. And if you just follow that structure, even if you only say just like the title sentence and you don't give that many reasons why your argument is true, that's okay, because you can build those kind of skills as you move on. It's really helpful if you start with that structure, because it's not just what comes out of your mouth that is easier to follow. It's also in your head. It's easier for you to go, okay, I've already said that thing, so that means logically, like, because I know I'm following the structure, I'm going to say this thing next. It's very, very helpful. Changed my life when I figured out structure in debating. So I'll open the floor now to any specific questions. It's been a long time of me just talking, so I welcome if anyone has any specific questions. Could just be, what's going to happen at club night now, or what kind of things have you done in debating? Happy to answer literally any questions. Someone's just asked about the slides. I am fairly sure they can be posted on the page after this. Very good request. We can put them up after, but I think we can also make sure that you can take like just a structure plan into club night prep with you if you want to. I've had another question about what's something you should definitely not do when debating. I think a big thing not to do in debating is just to rely on like really big sweeping statements, because I feel like debating's one of the most fun parts about debating is that you kind of get to a point where you're like empowered to say anything. But I think that the important part is that what you're trying to learn in debating is like to back everything up with like lots and lots of reasons why it's true. So I would encourage you to stay away from those like big sweeping statements that people make, because they often, instead of moving your case forward, just make you look a little bit silly, and can sometimes be a little bit hurtful to other people. So just try and focus on whatever you say, coming up with lots of reasons for it. Another thing you should definitely not do in debating is offer a point of information outside of in the first minute or the 6th minute, because it's quite confusing and that's protected time. Does anyone have any other questions? I'm looking on the live stream as well, so people watching over there, I haven't forgotten about you. And also people in person, I hope there's some way that you can get on your phone and ask questions if you have any. I don't know how, I think I can look at. Oh, I don't think I have any other message requests other than spam bots asking me to marry them. So very good. Oh, we have another question of what sort of stuff will the future development sessions cover? So next week, we'll be covering how to judge or what is judging in debating. So this seminar was about aimed at people who want to speak at club night, just to give you a really, really basic rundown of how debating works. The next development seminar will be a very basic rundown of how judging works in debating, what things you can do with it, and how you should do it. And then after those first two, as we move throughout the semester, it will be focused on more specific like skill building things. So week 3, I have a workshop planned on case building. So really going into depth. I just did a really, really overview rundown earlier in this session about how to make points. But in week 3, we'll talk about specifically how you should build cases as a team, what questions should you ask yourself, specifically how to build it. I think in the 4th session, I have planned a workshop on how to respond to things. And then from there, we will, until the mid-semester break, get in some very, very fun and very smart guests to tell us things about debating. So how to trainee, or how to, like what to expect from a New Zealand tournament as we come up to events in debating. And then looking way down the track towards like the second half of this semester and then the second semester, the second half of this semester will focus on like specific speaker positions. Hopefully we can get some of our very, very talented and successful speakers from the Debating Society in to give workshops on that. And then second semester, we will do workshops on different styles of debating, kind of focused on the tournaments that you can work towards. So it will be first half of first semester will be about impromptu debating, first half of second semester, sorry, and then the second half of the second semester will be about the British parliamentary format that I talked about earlier. Excellent. I hope that answers your question. And I think we have a little bit more time if we have any other questions, but otherwise, I'd very much encourage you to sign up for club night if you haven't already. It's very, very valuable. Even if you don't feel like speaking today and like getting up in front of everyone, even if you're online, which is way more chill because you're still in your bedroom, which is very fun. If you just feel like, watching a debate and seeing, like putting your toes in the water, seeing how it goes, I'd really encourage you to sign up to trainee, because that way you can watch a debate and then kind of see an adjudicator who knows what they're doing walk through how a debate works and how things stack up against each other. I think I learned the most in my earlier years from watching other people debate who are very good at debating, because then I kind of saw how people go through. So training is when you, so there'll be, in every debate, there'll be someone who judges the debate. So you will be judging the debate as well, but you're just learning from them. So your opinion or your like judgment of the debate isn't the thing that like you have to tell the teams exactly what you thought about the debate. That's the job of the main adjudicator. All you have to do is just chat to the judge at the end and be like, hey, these are my vibes of the debate. What did you think? And then they'll tell you what they thought. You can kind of see like, did you call parts of the debate the same way? It's more like informal, and there's no, like the teams aren't going to get angry at you if you thought that they lost, because that the judge is going to tell everyone what the outcome of the debate is. So to sign up for all of these things, there's a form on the event page for opening night, and you can pick there whether you want to be a speaker or whether you want to trainee. And you can also, if you have friends with you, you can prefer to go with one of your friends. Yes, welcome everyone. I think that the rest of exec will hop on this Zoom in a minute, so I will stop